In this example, we're asked to determine the value or the values of x in the interval. X is an element of 0 degrees to 90 degrees, the first quadrant, for which the sequence will be arithmetic. Okay, so what do you know about the arithmetic? We have to write down all the properties of arithmetic series or the sequence, right? So the first thing that we know about the arithmetic sequence or the series is that there is something that we call the constant difference, right? So that means that t2 minus, the second term minus the first term is going to be equal to the third term minus the second term, right? Formally, the difference between the second and the first term is going to be equal to the difference between the third term and the second term, and so on, right? What I mean by that is the constant difference d is equal to t2 minus t1, and that is also going to be equal to t3 minus t2, right? And so on. That doesn't change, it goes on forever, right? So that's why we call it a constant difference, because it is constant, right? So that is what we're going to utilize that property to determine what we are asked of, right? So like we said that d is equal to t2 minus t1, which is also going to be equal to t3 minus t2. Wherever we see t2, we're going to put the second term, and like that, right? So the second term in this case is 2 sine 3x, right? So we're going to subtract t1, which is negative 1. So that is going to be equal to t3, which is 5, minus t2, which is 2 sine 3x, right? So we asked to determine the value of x in the first quadrant, right? So in the first quadrant, we know that sign is positive. I want you to keep that in mind. Remember, we have a cast, right? All students take Coke. I guess all students take Coke, right? So it's a cast diagram, right? So in the first quadrant, all of the ratios are positive, including sign, right? So we know that sign is positive in the first quadrant, right? So keep that in mind. Sign is positive in the first quadrant. Let us continue with our equation or our problem. So 2 sine 3x minus negative 1 is going to be equal to 2 sine 3x plus 1. So that's equal to 5 minus 2 sine 3x. So let us take everything that is sign on the same side, in this case the left hand side, and take everything that does not have sign, the constant, to the right hand side. So we're going to take 2 sine 3x, that is negative, to the left hand side, making it positive, right? So we on the left hand side, we're going to end up with 2 sine 3x plus 2 sine 3x. That's going to be equal to 5 that we left on the right hand side, and then if we take positive 1 to the right hand side, it becomes negative, right? So 5 minus 1. So 2 sine 3x plus 2 sine 3x, that's 4 sine 3x. So that's equal to 5 minus 1 is 4, right? So dividing both sides by 4, we're going to end up with sine 3x is equal to 1. So from here, we have to determine the reference angle. The reference angle is going to be equal to the inverse of the sine of 1, right? So sine inverse of 1. Like I said, or like I always advise you to do, always utilize your calculator. We know that sine inverse 1, not all of us, but most of us, I'm sure we know that sine inverse of 1 is 90 degrees, right? But we always have to utilize a calculator to make sure that we don't make any mistakes. So the sine inverse of 1, what is it going to be equal to? That's 90, right? So our calculator just help us be certain of our answers. So reference is going to be 90 degrees, right? The reference angle is going to be 90 degrees. Remember that we're talking about the first quadrant, right? So first quadrant, everything is positive, right? So in the first quadrant, we're going to have the reference angle plus k multiplied by 360 degrees, right? 360 degrees because it's the sign that we're dealing with, right? So we do not have x, we have 3x. Please don't forget that we have 3x. I'm talking about this. Sine 3x is equal to 1, right? So we have 3x, not x. We have sine of 3x is equal to 1. So it is 3x, not x, right? So we have to consider that. So 3x is equal to the reference angle, that is 90 degrees, plus k multiplied by 360 degrees, right? So we're going to divide everything by 3 so that we can only be left with x, right? So dividing by 3 on both sides, we're going to be left with x is equal to 90 divided by 3 is 30 degrees, then plus 360 divided by 3 is 120 degrees, or out of k multiplied by 120 degrees, right? And then k is an element of integers, right? So this is how we do it, but we're not done yet because we don't know the value of k, right? So k is an element of integers, right? This is a general solution. Here we have found the general solution of this whole thing, right? But we're looking for the value of x, the specific value of x, right? So we have to include all the possible values of k and then determine which ones are going to help us be able to determine what x is, right? So if k is 0, then x is going to be, if k is equal to 0, then x is going to be equal to 30 degrees, right? But if k is less than 0, meaning -1 or -2 or whatever, as long as k is less than 0, whatever value that we're going to get is not going to be in the first quadrant. So that means that x is equal to 30 degrees is the only solution that we have. If k is equal to -1, we're going to have 30 plus k is -1 multiplied by 120. What is that going to be equal to? That is going to be equal to -90 degrees, and that is in the fourth quadrant. We're looking for the value of x that is in the first quadrant, so -1 does not work. So increasing the value of k as well, meaning k equal to 1, 30 plus 1 multiplied by 120. That's going to be 150. That is in the second quadrant, so that does not work either. So increasing the value of k further makes things even worse. You know what I'm saying? So that means that x can only be equal to 30 degrees because the other ones are not in the first quadrant. So that means that x is an element of 30 degrees. That is the solution. I hope that it was helpful, and if you have any questions, you know that you gotta leave them in the comment section, and I'll try to attend to them and try to like help you all understand what I actually meant by everything that I explained here.